did everything right and still vanished. The fire had burned down clean, not panicked. Food sat unopened, not abandoned in haste. The tents stood half-built, paused mid-task, like someone expected to return in minutes. 4 cousins came to Red Hollow Ridge to disappear from noise, not from the world. Nothing in that clearing suggested fear. Nothing suggested urgency. And yet, no one ever walked back out. The story did not begin with a scream or a struggle. It began with quiet normalcy, preserved too perfectly to ignore. In July 2003, the absence came first. Before suspicion, before headlines, before anyone thought to worry. Josh Rayburn was 19, already planning to leave Fentress County. Ryan Rayburn was 17, still rooted in it. Amy Collins had just graduated. Caleb Maurice was counting days to his license. They left with small expectations. 2 nights, a campfire, borrowed gear, familiar woods. Red Hollow Ridge was known, but never friendly. Sinkholes opened without warning. Old mining tunnels collapsed when the rains came. Cell service faded fast. Locals respected it, then avoided it. The cousins parked their SUV near an old fire road, locked it, and walked less than a mile in. They chose a clearing that had been used before. That mattered later. When they did not return on schedule, families waited. Teenagers stretched plans. Cousins lingered together. No one called law enforcement that first night. Phones rang. Messages stayed unanswered. By the second day, waiting turned brittle. By the third, it broke. Searchers found the SUV first. It was exactly where it should not have been. Locked, unmoved, dust no fresh tracks around it. Inside were nothing that explained delay. No notes. No signs of a decision to leave. The campsite came next. It should have told the story. Instead, it refused to speak. The fire pit was cold, cleaned down by time, not rushed water. Tents were neither fully raised nor torn down. Food had not spoiled from exposure. Wallets remained. A disposable camera sat unused. There was no blood. There were no drag marks. There were no footprints leaving the clearing. Even animals left no sign. It looked staged by absence alone. Investigators learned quickly what it was not. It was not a fight between them. It was not an animal attack. It was not a sinkhole collapse. It was not flash flooding. It was not for teenagers choosing to vanish together. Each of those theories collapsed under small, stubborn facts. Shoes were not left behind. Medication stayed in backpacks. Summer jobs went unattended. College paperwork sat unfinished at home. This was not an escape. It was an interruption. The first searches moved outward, 10 downward. Dogs followed Sin through the clearing, along the ridge, to a limestone outcrop, then stopped. Trails did not fade naturally. They ended. That detail mattered, but not yet. Helicopters scanned campy gaps. Volunteers combed ravines. Controlled detonations collapsed unsafe cave entrances. Nothing surfaced. No clothing, no remains, no tools. By late 2004, the case stopped producing answers. Red Hollow Ridge started producing stories. Whispers replaced facts. The ground became cursed in conversation. Teenagers dared each other to drive past it. Families avoided the name. The cousins stayed frozen in memory, never aging past that summer. Official files stayed open, but untouched. Evidence sat catalogued, thin but intact. Decades passed without a body, without charges, without resolution. Then the case moved again, not because of a confession, but because technology finally caught up to absence. In 2019, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation reopened the file, not with optimism, but with patience. Old assumptions were tested, not repeated. Soil from the SUV tires was re-examined. It did not match the immediate fire road. Aerial mapping Red Hollow Ridge without sentiment. In 2024, a regional land survey used LiDAR, seeing through trees, through brush, through decades of growth. Beneath private land, less than 2 miles from the campsite, something appeared that was never recorded. An underground structure, rectangular, reinforced, not natural, not mapped. A search warrant followed the data, not the rumor. What investigators found in early 2025 was not a grave in the woods. It was a concealed concrete chamber built into an abandoned mine shaft. Inside were burned personal effects, fragmented, incomplete, but identifiable. Family DNA confirmed what searchers had feared for 22 years. All 4 cousins were dead. Property records did not hide who owned the land. Utility anomalies traced maintenance patterns. Permit archives, once thought lost, were digitally reconstructed. One name kept returning, quietly, a local contractor, known, trusted, present. Witnesses remembered him near the campsite that week, offering warnings about wildlife, about unsafe ground. He had helped stabilize land across the ridge in the early 2000s. He had volunteered during the original searches. He had lived openly. Since under interrogation, prosecutors allege he lured the teens away from the clearing, not with force, but with authority. They allege the cousins stumbled onto the hidden chamber by accident. They allege the decision to kill them was not planned that morning, but made that night. Those claims will be tested in court. What is known from records and recovery is narrower and heavier. The campsite was not the scene of death. The ridge did not swallow them. They were removed deliberately. The absence was engineered. In March 2025, the arrest reached Red Hollow like a delayed echo. There was no relief in it, only clarity. The place had not been cursed. It had been controlled. And for 22 years, the truth stayed underground, waiting for someone to finally see what the forest had been
Red
hiding.
Hollow Ridge shaped the case before investigators ever arrived. Its geography dictated delay, misinterpretation, and missed signals. The ridge sat in a seam of Appalachian wilderness that never fully modernized. Narrow roads ended without warning. Property lines cut through forest without fences. Cell coverage dropped in pockets, not gradually. In 2003, that mattered. Calls did not fail all at once. They failed intermittently, creating false reassurance. Families assumed bad reception before danger. That assumption bought time the disappearance did not have. The area's history complicated response. Red Hollow Ridge had been mined decades earlier, then abandoned. Shafts were sealed unevenly. Some were documented, others were not. Sinkholes appeared after heavy rain, then vanished under leaves. Locals learned where not to step. Outsiders could not see the difference. When the cousins chose that location, they entered a place where absence had precedent. People had gone missing before, briefly. Hunters broke legs. Hikers lost trails. Searchers usually found them. That pattern influenced early judgment. Law enforcement treated the delay as likely misadventure, not immediate foul play. That choice shaped the first 48 hours. Resources were mobilized, but not escalated. The assumption was survivability. The terrain reinforced it. The campsite sat close to an old fire road, less than a mile from the vehicle, less than 2 miles from private land, with regular maintenance. Nothing about the map suggested total loss. That logic failed because the map was incomplete. Investigators relied on recorded features. They did not know what was undocumented. In the early days, search grids prioritized ravines, water flow, and known cave entrances. That decision followed protocol. It also left blind spots. The ridge's canopy hid vertical drops. Leaf cover masked disturbed ground. Even trained volunteers walked past altered terrain without seeing it. The lack of footprints misled early interpretation. In most wilderness cases, absence of tracks suggests environmental erasure. Rain, wind, animal movement. Here, weather reports showed none severe enough. The ground should have held something. It did not. That contradiction lingered without resolution. The locked SUV added another constraint. If the cousins had fled danger, they left transportation behind. That suggested panic, but the campsite showed none. Investigators tried to reconcile calm departure with immobilized exit. They could not. The area's culture further delayed clarity. Fentress County was tight-knit. Outsiders stood out. Locals did not. People assumed familiarity equaled safety. That belief shaped witness memory. Early statements described vehicles and individuals near the ridge as routine, not notable. Warnings offered to campers were seen as neighborly, not intrusive. Those details gained weight later, but not then. In 2003, investigators lacked tools to see beneath the surface. Ground-penetrating radar was limited. Aerial imagery relied on line of sight. Dense summer foliage erased anomalies. Even helicopters flew blind over continuity of green. The ridge looked unbroken. That illusion persisted for years. Media coverage followed the same logic. Reports emphasized danger of nature, not people. Stories referenced sinkholes and caves. The narrative framed the ridge as antagonist. That framing influenced tips. Calls focused on wildlife sightings, strange sounds, unexplored hollows. Few reported human behavior. That skewed the file. The passage of time hardened those early choices. As months passed without discovery, search areas expanded outward, not inward. Investigators assumed distance equaled explanation. They did not consider proximity. The idea that answers lay less than 2 miles from the campsite felt implausible. Too close, too obvious. That assumption held until technology removed human expectation from the equation. When LiDAR mapping arrived decades later, it did not interpret. It revealed. The ridge lost its secrecy and data. Structures appeared where none should exist. Lines cut through stone that nature does not draw. The environment that once concealed, now documented. Context shifted. What had seemed like wilderness chaos resolved into controlled space. Red Hollow Ridge was not lawless. It was unrecorded. That distinction mattered. The delay in resolution was not from lack of effort. It was from reliance on what was visible, known, and historically trusted. The terrain dictated belief. Belief dictated search. Search dictated silence. Only when context changed did the silence break. Before they were a case, they were ordinary in ways that mattered. Josh Rayburn was the oldest, 19, already feeling the pull away from Fentress County. Court records later confirmed he had submitted job applications outside the county line. He talked about leaving, not escaping. He planned to come back often. Family statements described him as the organizer, the one who checked lists, borrowed gear, made sure everyone fit in the SUV. Ryan Rayburn, 17, lived closer to the present. School records showed steady attendance, no disciplinary flags. He had a summer job lined up and complained about it constantly, which his mother later said was how she knew he planned to return. Amy Collins had graduated weeks earlier. Photos recovered from family albums showed her marking the date in pen, circling August on a calendar. She was deciding between community college and work. Friends described her as cautious, not impulsive. She packed extra food, extra socks, things that suggested preparation, not risk-taking. Caleb Morris was 16, the youngest, still tethered to home. He talked about getting his license more than the trip itself. His backpack held a learner's permit copy and a folded note reminding him of a dentist appointment the following week. Investigators logged that detail without comment. It mattered later. The cousins' relationships were uneven but close. They did not move as a single unit in daily life. They converged for family events, holidays, summer breaks. This trip was not symbolic. It was convenient. Red Hollow Ridge sat within reach. They had camped nearby before, though not at that exact clearing. Phone records showed no unusual calls before departure. No goodbyes, no arguments, no digital footprints suggesting distress. They left on a weekday afternoon, not a dramatic exit, just a shift from routine. Family members later testified that nothing felt unfinished. That absence of loose ends narrowed interpretation. People who plan to disappear leave signals. These 4 did not. At the campsite, their presence was methodical. Items were placed, not scattered. Food remained sealed, not half-used. The disposable camera held no exposed frames, suggesting arrival was recent, not overnight. That detail came from forensic inventory, not assumption. It indicated interruption, not conclusion. The cousins' clothing choices reflected familiarity with the area. Sturdy shoes, light jackets, no costumes of rebellion. When investigators interviewed friends, the stories aligned. None described fear. None described secrets. The trip was not framed as a last chance or an escape. It was framed as a pause. That consistency held across statements, which strengthened reliability. In missing person cases, inconsistency often signals hidden stress. Here there was none. The emotional toll on families unfolded slowly, then all at once. Initial waiting gave way to guilt. Parents replayed conversations for miscues. Siblings questioned why no one insisted on earlier action. Court transcripts later captured this shift, not in words but in pauses. Families attended search briefings with notebooks, writing down every technical term. They learned vocabulary they never wanted. As weeks passed, the cousins' rooms stayed intact. Beds were not reassigned. Clothes were not donated. Time froze inside houses that still paid bills. Holidays came, then passed. The absence did not fade. It hardened. Over years, the cousins became symbols to the community, but not to each other's families. They remained specific. Josh was still the one who forgot to return tools. Ryan still left shoes by the door. Amy still sang in the kitchen. Caleb still argued about curfews. Investigators noted this in later victim impact statements. The families resisted mythologizing. They wanted facts, not legends. That resistance mattered when rumors spread. Claims of cults, wilderness spirits, and voluntary disappearance surfaced online. Families corrected them publicly. They insisted the cousins were not reckless, not troubled, not thrill-seeking. Their insistence narrowed the case, forcing focus back to evidence. When confirmation came in 2025, it did not bring surprise. It brought alignment. DNA identification closed a question families had already answered internally. They had been waiting for proof, not hope. Statements given after the arrest avoided anger. They focused on time lost, not vengeance. That tone shaped public response. The cousins were remembered not for how they died, but for how unremarkable their plans had been. That ordinariness became the point. 4 people did everything expected of them. They prepared, they communicated, they stayed together, and still they were taken. Understanding who they were stripped the case of fantasy. It returned it to reality, where harm does not require chaos, only opportunity. Red Hollow Ridge was never neutral. Every investigation into the disappearance confronted its hazards first, because hazards were visible, recordable, and understandable. Sinkholes punctuated the terrain, some small and easily bridged, others yawning holes the size of cars. Reports from the Tennessee Department of Environment warned that summer rains could soften the earth and cause sudden collapses. Searchers traced the ridge after storms, expecting depressions, mudslides, or trapped hikers. None were found. Investigators then turned to caves and abandoned mine shafts. Fentress County had a history of informal mining dating back decades. Maps showed entrances sealed or collapsed, but records were incomplete. Controlled detonations were conducted to collapse unsafe shafts, a standard measure designed to prevent accidental discovery or injury. Nothing yielded the teens. Wildlife was considered next. Bears and bobcats roamed in the ridge, occasionally leaving evidence of attack. Forensic assessment of the campsite showed no fur, no blood, no signs of disturbance. A bear could not have carried 4 teenagers. Investigators documented every tree root, every boulder, every possible hazard. K9 units traced scents outward from the clearing, past the fire pit, and to a limestone outcrop. Their ascent abruptly ended. No natural continuation existed. That interruption suggested human involvement, but early teams had no proof. Environmental risk was a default explanation, because it fit the known terrain and required no suspect. It also delayed the focus on deliberate action. For years, the ridge dictated conclusions. Absence was attributed to misadventure. Authorities assumed teenagers might have wandered into water, fallen into a sinkhole, or become trapped underground. Each possibility was eliminated by evidence. No footprints in mud, no signs of struggle, no water disturbance. The terrain provided ambiguity, allowing time for misdirection. Weather reports verified that no flash flooding occurred during the disappearance. No recent storms could have eroded tracks or swept away belongings. Trees stood where they had for decades. Debris lay undisturbed, even when volunteers returned repeatedly. The ridge gave nothing new. Search grids expanded outward, considering every ravine, holler, and ridge line. Teams used helicopters, dogs, and volunteers. They brought technology, but the environment resisted it. Forest density obscured vision. Canopy cover blocked aerial photographs. Light and shadow confused trackers. The ridge hid simple details. A disturbed layer of soil here, a flattened patch of grass there. None were identified initially as evidence. That subtlety allowed the case to stagnate. Investigators could account for natural hazards, but only as eliminated possibilities. Each dead end strengthened the perception of the ridge as adversary, rather than acknowledging human intervention. By framing the environment as risk, early reports overlooked the methodical nature of what had occurred. Red Hollow Ridge did not kill the teens. It masked the evidence long enough for concealment to succeed. Over the next decade, environmental limitations dictated investigative strategy. Ground-penetrating radar was attempted, but dense stone and metal debris gave false positives. Topographical mapping improved, but only documented known features. Investigators lacked the capability to see beneath the surface in 3 dimensions. The ridge dictated patience and protocol, but not discovery. Only when technology advanced. LiDAR, aerial soil analysis, digital permit reconstruction. Could investigators pierce the environmental veil? That breakthrough was not from risk assessment. It was from literal visualization. The ridge's hazards had guided human interpretation for years, creating a narrative of danger where none existed. Understanding the environment and its capacity to mislead reframed the case entirely. What was once attributed to natural risk became a record of deliberate concealment. The ridge had not failed investigators. Investigators had failed to see beyond its camouflage. When the hidden chamber emerged, it revealed how risk had been manipulated. The teens had left a site free from hazard, only to encounter a hazard manufactured by human design. The ridge, once an antagonist, became a silent witness. It had observed everything, while authorities looked at the wrong danger. Recognition of that distinction would define all subsequent analysis, changing how each piece of evidence was interpreted and how the narrative of disappearance evolved over the following 2 decades. The crime itself remained invisible for decades, defined more by what was absent than what was present. The campsite spoke in silence. Tents half erected, food untouched, wallets left behind. These details marked a departure interrupted. Investigators would later confirm that no struggle occurred there. No defensive wounds, no overturned gear, no blood. The SUV, parked a short distance away, was locked, as if the occupants had expected to return. That in itself became a critical clue. Forensic teams analyzed tire treads, noting that dirt patterns suggested recent movement across soft soil, but without human footprints leading away. K9 units followed the faint scent from the clearing to a limestone outcrop before abruptly losing the trail, a point that indicated transportation or coercion. It suggested human agency, but without witnesses or physical evidence, the trail remained theoretical. Investigators considered a series of possibilities. Runaway behavior was plausible at first glance, but quickly collapsed under scrutiny. Teenagers do not typically abandon medication, money, and carefully planned personal schedules. Each had future commitments documented: summer jobs, college applications, dentist appointments. None had communicated any intent to disappear. Voluntary departure was ruled out, though it lingered in early media speculation. Animal attacks were equally improbable. No tracks led away. No remains or fur were discovered. Weather reports and environmental conditions excluded accidental death in the forest or cave collapse. The pattern left only one consistent conclusion: human removal. Yet without bodies, that conclusion remained provisional. Authorities had to balance interpretation with legal caution. The crime's concealment relied on preparation and patience. Whoever acted understood the terrain and exploited its isolation. The ridge offered cover, but not as a weapon. It simply delayed discovery. When the LiDAR survey eventually revealed a hidden underground structure, it transformed speculation into clarity. The chamber, integrated into an abandoned mine shaft and reinforced with concrete, accounted for the absence of bodies and forensic evidence. Burned personal effects inside allowed identification only through family DNA, confirming the worst fears. Property records, permit reconstructions, and utility anomalies linked the location to a local contractor whose presence in the area had been routine and unnoticed at the time. Re-interviewed witnesses recalled interactions they had dismissed in 2003, warnings about wildlife, guidance around unstable areas. Investigators concluded that these actions were part of a pretext to isolate the teens. The alleged sequence of events suggested luring, discovery of the chamber, and then deliberate killing to prevent exposure. While exact timing and methodology remained partially unknown, reconstruction based on recovered evidence, witness statements, and environmental analysis created a coherent narrative. The crime's mechanics were not theatrical or chaotic. They were methodical, exploiting normalcy to mask intent. This calculated approach explained the absence of struggle, the intact campsite, and the inability of search teams to locate the victims despite extensive efforts over decades. The deliberate engineering of disappearance created a temporal gap, a vacuum in which the case stagnated. For investigators, understanding the crime meant reconciling what was present: abandoned belongings, undisturbed tents, lost scent trails, with what was absent: human remains, footprints, immediate confessions. The gap itself became the defining element of the crime, highlighting the unique challenge posed by disappearances executed with precision and knowledge of both terrain and investigative limitations. In this way, the Red Hollow Ridge case exemplified the tension between human intent and environmental misdirection, demonstrating how a crime could remain invisible while leaving subtle, traceable evidence that only modern analysis could ultimately reveal. The initial investigation began under a sense of urgency, tempered by caution. In July 2003, when the cousins failed to return, the Fentress County Sheriff's Office activated standard missing person protocols. Officers canvassed homes, checked phone records, and interviewed neighbors, focusing first on immediate explanations. Volunteers and law enforcement scoured trails, ravines, and old logging roads. Helicopters flew above the canopy, attempting to spot tents or disturbed areas from the air. K-9 units tracked the campsite, following scent to a limestone outcrop before losing the trail entirely. Investigators documented the locked SUV, noting that the absence of forced entry or disturbance suggested voluntary movement, though this theory conflicted with items left behind. Search grids expanded over more than 3,000 acres, targeting sinkholes, caves, and old mine shafts. Controlled detonations collapsed unstable shafts to prevent accidental discovery or misinterpretation of natural hazards. Early investigators consulted with wildlife experts to rule out animal attacks, while environmental assessments eliminated flash floods and other natural hazards. Law enforcement also explored social and behavioral possibilities. Runaway scenarios were evaluated, but further inquiries showed that each teen had ongoing obligations, financial needs, and future plans that made voluntary disappearance unlikely. Witness statements were collected, noting unusual activity near Red Hollow Ridge in the days preceding the disappearance. At first, these were treated as anecdotal, lacking corroboration. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation assisted, sharing forensic and technical resources. Despite exhaustive efforts, no physical evidence of the teen's presence beyond the campsite or SUV was found. Every item of clothing, every personal effect, every piece of gear was accounted for at the site, suggesting a deliberate removal rather than accidental misadventure. Media coverage influenced public perception, emphasizing the wilderness dangers of the ridge rather than the possibility of human intervention. Families attended briefings, offering insights into the teens' habits and routines, while volunteers mapped the ridge's hazards. As weeks turned into months, investigators maintained hope for a conventional resolution. But the combination of dense terrain, undocumented underground structures, and the methodical disappearance challenged conventional search methods. By late 2004, the case had stalled. Investigators preserved all evidence, cataloging the SUV, campsite, and personal items for potential future analysis. Records were meticulously maintained, but without new leads, the case moved toward cold status. In retrospect, the 2003-2004 investigation reflected both diligence and the constraints of the era. Limited technology, incomplete topographical data, and reliance on eyewitness accounts shaped by local familiarity. It also highlighted how normal assumptions, voluntary departure, environmental accident, or wildlife attack can dominate early missing person cases, creating blind spots that obscure deliberate concealment. The meticulous documentation of initial findings, however, proved crucial. Years later, when LiDAR surveys, soil analyses, and digital permit reconstructions became available, investigators could reinterpret early data with precision. The initial investigation had preserved every clue, every trail, every anomaly. Its thoroughness, even without immediate resolution, laid the foundation for understanding the crime's mechanics, reconstructing the disappearance, and eventually identifying the responsible party over 2 decades later. The strategy balanced urgency with method, yet revealed how careful procedures alone cannot overcome deliberate planning, designed to exploit assumptions, terrain, and human expectation. The legal process surrounding the Tennessee 2003 Campfire Disappearance was slow, deliberate, and constrained by decades of absence. Early on, law enforcement focused on evidence collection and preservation rather than prosecution, because there were no suspects, no bodies, and no direct proof of wrongdoing. Case files compiled by the Fentress County Sheriff's Office and supplemented by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation documented every search effort, every witness statement, and every recovered item from the campsite and SUV, creating a meticulous archive. Between 2003 and 2006, investigators submitted reports to prosecutors outlining the inconclusive findings, noting that theories of voluntary departure, accidental death, and environmental hazard were systematically ruled out. Legal authorities at the time faced a familiar obstacle. Without a body or direct evidence of a crime, charges could not be filed. Investigators remained bound by evidentiary standards, constrained by the statutes of Tennessee and federal procedure. Search warrants were obtained only when reasonable suspicion could be established, limiting access to private properties near Red Hollow Ridge. Over the years, The legal dimension of the case shifted from immediate response to preservation and future potential. All recovered items, including personal effects and the SUV, were logged and stored according to chain of custody protocols, anticipating eventual forensic reanalysis. The absence of charges did not equate to neglect. Prosecutors periodically reviewed files, consulting with investigators to determine if new techniques could reopen investigative avenues. Case summaries maintained detailed timelines, cross-referencing school records, family statements, environmental reports, and media coverage. These files later proved critical during the 2019 reinvestigation, when cold case units could apply modern forensic methods without the risk of chain of evidence violation. When the 2024 LiDAR survey identified the hidden underground chamber, investigators secured search warrants based on historical documentation and new digital evidence, including reconstructed land permits and utility anomalies, adhering strictly to constitutional requirements. The 2025 arrest of the local contractor followed multiple procedural safeguards, corroborated witness testimony, trace evidence linking him to the chamber, and recovered personal effects confirmed through family DNA. Prosecutors alleged that he had manipulated the terrain and exploited prior assumptions, but all claims remained under legal scrutiny, recognizing that accusations must be weighed against provable fact. The legal framework ensured that even decades after the disappearance, the case could proceed without overreach, avoiding speculation or public trial by media. Throughout, the law functioned as a stabilizing force, providing rules that limited premature conclusions while preserving the possibility of resolution. By the time formal charges were brought, the groundwork laid by the initial investigation, careful evidence preservation, and adherence to legal procedure enabled prosecutors to present a coherent narrative in court. This combination of patient investigative work and procedural rigor demonstrated how complex cases, particularly those involving missing persons in challenging terrain, require decades-long alignment of law, technology, and forensic science to reach actionable outcomes without compromising fairness or admissibility. The evidence collected over the years often conflicted, creating challenges that slowed the investigation and complicated interpretation. From the earliest searches, K9 units followed scent trails that abruptly ended at a limestone outcrop, suggesting human removal, yet no vehicle or physical obstruction was immediately evident. This inconsistency led to multiple hypotheses that could not fully account for the facts. The SUV, locked and undisturbed, contradicted theories of voluntary departure, but investigators could not prove coercion at the time. Personal belongings left in the campsite, food, wallets, a disposable camera, pointed to interrupted activity, yet the lack of footprints or drag marks suggested that removal occurred under controlled circumstances, a detail not reconcilable with natural hazards. Early witness statements added another layer of conflict. Some neighbors recalled a contractor in the area, assisting with land stabilization, while others remembered seeing teenagers exploring alone, seemingly unconcerned. Memories diverged further when re-interviews occurred years later, with recollections influenced by the passage of time and local folklore about the ridge. Environmental assessments provided partial clarity, ruling out flash floods, sinkholes, and wildlife attacks, but the absence of concrete hazard evidence left a vacuum for speculation. Technological limitations at the time compounded these conflicts. Ground-penetrating radar produced inconclusive readings through dense soil and rock. Aerial surveys under summer canopy masked subtle disturbances. Even controlled detonations in abandoned mine shafts yielded no human remains, leaving investigators with contradictory results. Terrain analysis suggested danger, but physical evidence suggested deliberate concealment. Media reporting amplified these inconsistencies, emphasizing natural risks over human agency, which affected both public perception and the focus of tips from the community. When the case was revisited in 2019, modern techniques exposed further contradictions. Soil analysis from the SUV tires indicated travel over terrain inconsistent with earlier search patterns, yet no tracks were recorded in that area in 2003. LiDAR imaging revealed a hidden underground structure, aligning some anomalies with a physical location, but raising questions about why prior searches had missed it. Trace fibers recovered from the chamber, linked to the contractor, contradicted initial assumptions that no human intervention occurred. Digital reconstruction of land permits filled gaps in historical records, yet prior investigators had no access to this information, explaining why multiple theories had competed for legitimacy over the years. These conflicts illustrate the difficulty of reconciling limited evidence, environmental ambiguity, and evolving witness memory, highlighting why the case remained unresolved for more than 2 decades. Every anomaly, every contradiction, and every absence required careful interpretation to prevent misattribution. Only when all strands, physical evidence, digital reconstruction, witness accounts, and environmental mapping, were analyzed together could investigators produce a coherent narrative, demonstrating how conflicting data, if preserved and re-examined, can ultimately converge to reveal truths that were previously obscured. Reinvestigation began in 2019, with a level of technological rigor unavailable in 2003. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation reopened the case not with assumption, but with methodical review of every archived file, every photograph, and every item recovered from the campsite and SUV. Soil from the vehicle tires underwent analysis using techniques that could detect movement over previously unrecognized terrain. Subtle discrepancies emerged. The tire patterns indicated traversal over compacted soil inconsistent with established fire roads. Investigators noted this, but required confirmation from spatial analysis. LiDAR surveys, conducted in 2024 as part of a regional land assessment, revealed an anomaly beneath private land less than 2 miles from the original campsite. The survey showed a structure integrated into an abandoned mine shaft, rectangular and reinforced with concrete, entirely undocumented in county records. The discovery prompted the execution of a search warrant in early 2025. Inside, burned personal effects were recovered and later matched to the victims through surviving family DNA. Re-examination of permit archives, digitally reconstructed from deleted 2003 land records, revealed that a local contractor had been performing stabilization work in the area at the time. Utility anomalies supported his presence, while witnesses recalled seeing him near the campsite during the disappearance, providing context to previously dismissed observations. Trace fibers collected from the chamber correlated to materials handled by the contractor. The reinvestigation emphasized method over assumption. Investigators reanalyzed every prior decision, every search grid, and every witness statement, cross-referencing new findings with archived evidence. They reconstructed sequences of movement, factoring in terrain, sightlines, and vehicle accessibility. Digital mapping confirmed that the route from campsite to chamber could be traversed with the vehicle, aligning with earlier scent trail observations. Investigators also revisited environmental constraints, confirming that no natural hazards could account for the disappearance. The reinvestigation demonstrated the cumulative value of preserved evidence and modern technology. What was previously invisible became traceable, and anomalies that once suggested multiple competing explanations now coalesced into a consistent narrative. The contractor's involvement, once only circumstantial, was now supported by converging lines of forensic, environmental, and digital evidence. The reinvestigation also highlighted prior investigative limitations, including over-reliance on surface hazards and incomplete understanding of undocumented terrain. By synthesizing decades of data with new insights, authorities reconstructed the events of July 2003 with unprecedented clarity, establishing a timeline, a method of removal, and a site of concealment. The case, once defined by absence and uncertainty, evolved into a structured account grounded in corroborated evidence, demonstrating how patient re-examination, combined with technological advancement, can resolve even the most perplexing cold cases. Systemic limitations shaped the trajectory of the Tennessee 2003 disappearance from the very beginning, constraining what investigators could see, interpret, and act upon. In 2003, technology for detecting underground anomalies was limited and costly. Ground-penetrating radar existed, but produced inconsistent results when faced with dense stone, compacted soil, and reinforced concrete. Aerial imagery relied on line-of-sight photography, with dense summer canopy masking subtle disturbances. Even well-trained K9 units could only follow scent trails until they were interrupted, as occurred at the limestone outcrop. Procedural norms also played a role. Investigators were obliged to operate within statutes that required probable cause for property searches. With no immediate evidence of a crime, early access to private lands was constrained, leaving potential clues untouched for years. Resource limitations affected both manpower and time. Search teams could only cover so much terrain, often prioritizing obvious hazards over unverified anomalies. Local volunteers were invaluable, but their effectiveness was variable, influenced by familiarity with the ridge and personal interpretation of what counted as significant. Witness memory presented another systemic challenge. Statements taken under stress, months after the disappearance, and later re-examined decades later, were inevitably inconsistent. Investigators had to balance credibility with potential bias, understanding that recollections were shaped by time, media reports, and community narratives. Evidence storage itself was subject to systemic constraints. Maintaining chain of custody over decades required meticulous cataloging and preservation, often in facilities not optimized for long-term storage of fragile items like clothing, disposable cameras, and trace fibers. The case also highlighted the limitations of contemporaneous forensic science. Soil analysis, fiber comparison, and digital mapping were rudimentary in 2003, constraining interpretation of what little evidence existed. Investigative collaboration was similarly restricted. Coordination between local law enforcement, state agencies, and federal resources required protocols that could slow responsiveness. Communication channels, data sharing, and centralized databases were less robust, meaning that early anomalies might not have been connected across departments. Even media coverage influenced systemic perception. Early reports focused on environmental danger, shaping both public expectation and the flow of tips, directing attention away from human intervention. These structural limitations explain why multiple hypotheses, voluntary disappearance, environmental hazard, wildlife attack, dominated early investigation despite contradicting evidence. Only when technology advanced, LiDAR mapping revealed hidden structures, digital archives reconstructed deleted permits, and DNA testing confirmed identities, could investigators overcome these systemic barriers. The limitations were not failures of diligence, but constraints of era, resources, and procedure. Understanding them is essential to appreciating why the case remained unsolved for more than 2 decades, and why resolution required both technological innovation and patient, methodical reinterpretation of existing evidence. The Red Hollow Ridge case serves as a clear example of how systemic factors, from environmental mapping to legal protocol and forensic capacity, can define the pace and scope of justice, even in cases with abundant preservation of initial data. The long-term impact of the Tennessee 2003 Campfire Disappearance extended far beyond the families directly involved, shaping both community memory and regional perception of Red Hollow Ridge. For more than 2 decades, the ridge became a symbol of absence, a space where curiosity and fear intertwined. Local residents spoke of it in hushed tones, warning newcomers about vanished hikers and teenagers who never returned. The families' lives were marked by the slow erosion of certainty. Vacations were postponed, routines adjusted, and anniversaries observed with the weight of unanswered questions. Psychological tolls persisted, as parents and siblings repeatedly revisited minor details. Forgotten calls, unattended appointments, casual remarks that now seemed significant. The cousins, frozen at ages 19, 17, 18, and 16, became touchstones in community consciousness, reminders that ordinary plans could be disrupted by extraordinary malice. Red Hollow Ridge itself became a case study in local lore, shaping conversations about wilderness safety, land access, and trust in neighbors. Schools, community organizations, and youth groups incorporated cautionary narratives about preparation, visibility, and accountability, sometimes blurring factual boundaries with cautionary exaggeration. The 2025 arrest reshaped that narrative, replacing uncertainty with specificity. Shockwaves ran through the tight-knit community, where the contractor had been a known figure, attending church functions, volunteering in early search efforts, and otherwise integrated into local life. Public dialogue shifted from speculation about accidents or supernatural interference to discussions of betrayal, access, and concealed risk. Legal and investigative developments highlighted the importance of procedural diligence, evidence preservation, and technological application, influencing law enforcement practices in neighboring counties. For the families, closure was partial. Confirmation of death allowed grief to move from hypothetical to tangible. Yet the absence of the cousins' final moments, the precise details of their removal, and the emotional manipulation by the perpetrator left enduring gaps. Memorials and community gatherings recognized their lives rather than the circumstances of their deaths, reinforcing a narrative centered on humanity instead of horror. The case also influenced regional media coverage, emphasizing the importance of fact-based reporting, witness protection, and restraint in speculation, as prior sensationalism had complicated investigation and public understanding. Over time, Red Hollow Ridge transitioned from a locus of fear to a site of remembrance and learning, where the lessons of planning, trust, and investigative patience were embedded into local consciousness. The enduring impact demonstrates that cold cases do not exist solely in the archive. They shape communities, influence behavior, and alter collective perception, long before resolution becomes possible. The closure in the Tennessee 2003 Campfire Disappearance was deliberate, measured, and restrained, shaped by decades of unanswered questions and meticulous investigation. When the hidden chamber was discovered in early 2025, and personal effects matched through family DNA, authorities did not rush to dramatize events. The arrest of the local contractor provided clarity, not spectacle. Evidence indicated that the teens had been lured from their campsite under false pretenses, led to the concealed structure, and killed to silence discovery. But the precise sequence of their final moments remains unknown. Investigators presented the case in terms of verifiable actions, forensic correlation, and documented witness statements, avoiding speculation about intent beyond what evidence could support. The community of Red Hollow absorbed the news with a mixture of shock and relief, understanding that the uncertainty which had shaped decades of anxiety was finally resolved. Families experienced a form of closure grounded in fact, confirmation of the cousins' deaths, and the identification of the responsible party. Yet even as grief became tangible, unanswered questions persisted, particularly regarding motive, the perpetrator's premeditation, and what might have been unnoticed over the intervening years. Memorials focused on the lives lost rather than the method of their deaths, emphasizing human presence and ordinary plans interrupted, rather than the mechanics of crime. Law enforcement and legal teams maintained transparency about what was known and what remained uncertain, underscoring the difference between documentation and conjecture. The case closed procedurally, but remained instructive. It demonstrated the value of preserving evidence, adhering to investigative rigor, and allowing technology and analysis to uncover truths without rushing narrative closure. The ridge itself, once a symbol of absence and fear, became a place of reflection, a reminder that disappearance does not erase life, that patience in investigation can eventually pierce even the most carefully constructed concealment. In this restrained closure, the story of Josh Rayburn, Ryan Rayburn, Amy Collins, and Caleb Morris exists not as sensational legend, but as a record of ordinary lives intersected by extraordinary malice, and a testament to the painstaking process through which truth, however delayed, can emerge.